Qualify the Podcast Season 2. This is episode 4, where we discuss a little bit more of our internal issues, Black matters, our social struggles, as well as our social concerns. And with me for Season 2, episode 4, I have vegan activist, entrepreneur, and educator, Bianca Mills, reporting live from Miami. Hey, Bianca, how you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great, thanks. How are you?
Doing well. Remember a few housekeeping notes for the audience: like, subscribe to all of the platforms, however you want to find us. With that, the reason why we were bringing up the discussion for this season concerning activism, social issues, is in light of everything that's happening in our world, in our nation. New presidency, Juneteenth, national holiday now. It's a lot of progress. Some of us may be polarized and feeling like that is not enough or it's about time. But it's more interesting for me to have the platform discussion with individuals of like minds, or we can just have social discord. I met Bianca through Instagram, looking at her profile. We followed each other and I realized that A, she's vegan, B, lives an alkaline lifestyle. Also wants to discuss on her platform in terms of how veganism can be activism for social education, and more. And it really intrigued me. So with that, I'd like to have the conversation with her. Can you platform for the group? What is vegan versus plant-based?
So, vegan simply just means nothing from the animal, nothing that comes from the animal, no animal byproducts. So like no cheese, no dairy, no butter. It could have been made in the lab, but as long as it doesn't have an animal byproduct, that qualifies as vegan. So Oreos are vegan, right? Fries, if they're not cooked in like meat grease, they're vegan. Certain foods are vegan. Being plant-based now is more talking about whole foods from the earth, whole grains, fruits, veggies, things that have been not processed. So for me personally, I kind of prefer to say that I'm plant-based because that's what I try to lean towards most of the time. But just for the sake of not confusing people, I will just say vegan because I know veganism is becoming a little more popular now. It's trending and it's a word that more people are familiar with versus like plant-based.
Sure. Okay, so that intrigues me. So when you say it can't have, of course, be anything made from an animal, right? So no milk, no cheese, bee honey even would be against veganism by a concept, right? But you did say it can be made in the lab. So the new meat, the Impossible Burger, things like that, can we call that on the spectrum of vegan?
So I was just gonna use that as an example. I know like these vegan meats are like trending, especially more fast food restaurants are trying to like kind of adapt certain, menu items to attract the vegan crowd, a different market. But, to me, the Impossible Burger is just like the Frankenstein burger. It's completely, made in a lab. I have had it before. I had it, back when I wasn't trying to be as, aware of the more plant-based eating. And I mean, it's delicious. It tastes just like a burger. But the fact of the matter is, it is vegan, but it's not healthy. And I think that's an important distinction to make. Vegan doesn't mean healthy. And so that's why I prefer to try and distinguish between plant-based and vegan. Now, I think these vegan meats are great to kind of get people kind of introduced to the lifestyle who are maybe interested in trying to do that and understanding, there's this misconception that if you're vegan, you don't eat and you just eat salads. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. But I think the danger with some of these meats aren't healthy because, again, they're not coming from the earth. Mother Nature isn't producing it, or they're not using majority of, plant-based products to make it. And, it's just not really good for you. So sometimes I kind of feel like if you're going to eat the Impossible Burger, you might as well just eat the meat, in my opinion.
But can you give me a little bit of background about when you started living a plant-based lifestyle, but then also how you got your education on plant-based?
Yeah, so I started I'm going to say my journey into veganism, because I had started and kind of fell off and kind of went back. So I started the journey and really wanting to do it. I want to say back in about 2014, I was a senior in college. My grandparents were vegetarians. I spent a great deal of time with them. So I knew about, things like tofu, some meat replacements, and going to my grandmother's house, a lot of times she would cook, there was no meat being cooked. So I wasn't a stranger to that. Also, I was brought up Seventh-day Adventist, and as Seventh-day Adventist, we don't eat certain meats. So I grew up not eating pork, not eating shellfish, things like that, things that, according to the Bible are unclean meats, quote unquote. So I kind of always knew a little bit about how to not incorporate meat in my diet or not have the need for meat. But I started on my own doing the veganism and really wanting to do it for myself in 2014. I basically kind of got my education just from doing the research on my own. I was always very curious about veganism throughout college, but I had stories about people who either, lost too much weight and became sick and became anemic from doing it, or I read stories about people who gained a lot of weight. I read an article about a woman who gained 50 pounds being vegan. So for a while, I wasn't really taking the plunge because I was like, okay, if I do this, like, how do I make sure, I'm not on one end of the spectrum, on too much of an extreme. But then one day I started watching these documentaries on Netflix. I think I watched like Forks Over Knives and a few other documentaries. And when I saw the breakdown and understood kind of like how these meats are produced, what's in them, the lack of sanitary methods being used in some of the slaughterhouses, just all these different things, and the health benefits, the connection to meat consumption. I pretty much went cold turkey and cleaned out my entire fridge. I just threw everything out. And then what I started doing was I started Googling and researching recipes for foods that I knew I liked. So, like, for example, I love mac and cheese. So I looked up a vegan mac and cheese recipe and I kind of went from there. And kind of started doing it like that, looking up my favorite recipes in a vegan version, also trying to do like lots of smoothies, fruits, I was, on the vegan meats at that point a little bit too, but that's how I kind of started getting my way into it and learning, and a lot of experimentation, a lot of trial and error, to be honest, but that's kind of how I started up with it.
Makes sense. I, as a fitness professional, my journey through that has always gone along with eating. My stance of it wasn't necessarily supplementation, whereas others do that. It just really wasn't in my main interest bracket. What I mean by that is that sometimes you'll push a product onto a client, this is going to give you weight loss. This is going to give you, super veins, just depending on what interest they would be in. But for me, it was really more about consumption. It truly was about where are you going to get your proteins from? Where are you going to balance that out with the fibers, good fats, bad fats, things like that. And even when I got certified, that was the methodology that the book taught us. It didn't teach us about creatine, for argument's sake, right? So that journey led me into a plant-based period of my life. It wasn't for extremely long by virtue of how long I've been eating meat. It was almost for a year though, that I was, really working that out. So I had a trial with it, but it was incredibly hard for me to find things that I felt balanced me out when I was trying to put together my daily diet, right? But in a later segment of our episode, we'll talk about some good recipes. You got to give me some good recipes. But let me go back for a moment. So your family, you were raised Seventh-day Adventist?
Yeah, Seventh-day Adventist. I don't practice, but that's what I was brought up on.
Sure. Do I understand that to be to have been more founded within the Caribbean community?
So I'm sorry, I probably should have explained more what it was. So I don't know if I would say it's more the Caribbean community, but I did notice that the churches I would go to had a large Caribbean population.
Fair enough.
But so, one of the fundamental differences between Seventh-day Adventists and I guess other religions is that, a lot of religions, practice going to church services, for example, and their day of rest on Sunday. What we would do is it's on Saturday. So that's based on the days of creation in the Bible. That's the seventh day of the week. Lord rested on the seventh day, therefore that is a day of rest for us. Kind of like Judaism, similar to that. And the guidelines are a little more, at least the guidelines that we follow are a little bit more strict than other religions. So like, again, with the dietary, there's no pork eating, there's no things like crab, shellfish, you're only eating fish with scales and fins, no body piercings, tattoos, a very like kind of strict traditional take on religion. Again, I don't practice that. I don't really practice religion, but just as a child and most of us in the family, as kids, that's what we were exposed to. That's kind of the lifestyle we had to live. And so that was part of my dietary journey, because just growing up just off of that.
I know a lot of people that have very different religious backgrounds. It does tend to funnel down to a few core principles, but even in that, I mean, that wasn't necessarily the direction of the question. It's just that when I did travel and when I was traveling within the Caribbean community, that pops up a lot, in terms of a core religion. I said, I guess, because I'm not right to speak about it, I guess that's normal, within the island community. Not necessarily the mainstay, but, at least it occurs more. Right.
Right.
That's how you started. And I think that's great. My thing was through consulting and research also. I would find friends who, were vegan. I mean, hardcore vegan. And they would, try to give me replacements. I go to some homes that sometimes, maybe the wife was vegan, the husband was not, but he, just let her do her thing. And she would make vegan chili right next to the chili, right? The standard chili. And she wants to trick people and say, "Oh, I bet you can't figure out which is which." Which is, I don't care. I'd eat anything. It doesn't matter to me. But that what actually maybe triggered me more is that when I started to look into menu items, when you see a non-meat or a vegan menu, they usually have the same names as what you would get with the meat. So these eggs on the menu aren't eggs. These would be tofu, right? It would be scrambled tofu. And so, well, why wouldn't you just call it scrambled tofu? And I asked them that at the restaurant, because it's not sausage either, it's soy, right? So why wouldn't you just call it what it is? I said, well, most people don't want to eat it if they knew what they were eating.
And see, that's the thing about it. And so, when I first started, I was into the vegan meats. I would eat like, tofu scrambled for breakfast with like toast and fruits, and a lot of vegan replacements do have soy. I try my hardest to stay away from soy. Soy is no good for you. Yeah. But the thing is, and I used to really love like the vegan cheeses and stuff like that, because I used to love dairy cheese. It was like my thing. That was the hardest thing for me to give up as I got on this journey. But there's a certain mental shift that needs to happen in order for you to really kind of commit to the lifestyle. And as a vegan or as someone who's plant-based, you really shouldn't be craving the taste of these things. The whole point is to want to consume the more natural earth foods. In my opinion, that should be the objective. And something I always tell people when it comes to like meat, for example, you don't really like meat. You like the plants you season it with. So for example, you don't go get your piece of chicken, wash it, and then just cook it. You at the very least put some lemon juice, garlic powder, onion powder, depending on what, if you're more health conscious, maybe you fry, whatever the case is. But I've never heard someone say, oh, I just wash a piece of chicken and then put it on the stove. No one that I know anyway. You're seasoning it with something. You're marinating it something. So if you don't like the meat as it is, but you have to season it with plants, that means you don't really like meat. You like the plants you season it with. You know what I'm saying? It's like, so it's the same things you season the meat with. You could season, I don't like tofu, but let's say, tofu with, or you could season mushrooms with. Like mushrooms are a great meat replacement. Portobello mushrooms, crimini mushrooms, oyster mushrooms. You could apply the same thing because you're seasoning the chicken or the steak 9 times out of 10 with some type of plant or herb. You know what I'm saying?
All right.
So
So don't jump ahead. Don't jump ahead because and this is so interesting. Okay. So let me just repeat this because that was a hot gem. You don't like meat. You like the plants you season it with.
right.
You should probably put that on a t-shirt. I'm not lying. Like you throw that down for merch, right? Do that before this airs so that you can just capitalize, right? But no, that's really interesting. You really made me think about it, because I'm not on this journey now. When I was, I'll tell you what, I'll do you one better. So I'm not on this journey now, but when I used to cut weight. I used to compete, right, for a couple of different sports, right? And even having to cut weight, there's an approach that you would make in order to make the weight. And your diet will restrict you from eating certain things, right? Depending on where you're trying to compete. So instead of, beef and pork, if that's a normal diet, maybe you cut that down to fish or chicken or just chicken only, right? So you can shred down, quote unquote, shred down.
Right.
And it strips your taste buds. I mean, it completely cleans your palate because you're not tasting things the way you used to, right? Your saturated fats are effectively gone. And then your trans fats, the way you're not getting those at all. So, and your salts aren't iodized, you're going mineral only if you do it right. And I always thought it was interesting that after we're done and I want to go have a meal, all right, I got to get back to normal, whatever normal is, right? And I would have something and I'm immediately sick after that.
So it's funny because my father actually, when I was younger, used to do bodybuilding competitions.
Okay.
He's a personal trainer. So, I mean, he was by no stretch of the imagination vegan, but I remember being in the house and only thing he's cooking is grilled chicken and veggies, no salts, like you said, no fats, carb cycling, shred period, all of that. And then the first thing they all do after competition is like run down to Denny's or run down to the IHOP and stuff their face. And then the next morning he's like bloated, he feels sick, which is interesting. There's some type of correlation there. There's something to be said about that. Yeah. You know what I mean? I find it very interesting.
There is. No, I agree with you. I think that, and I'm not going to use a scientific metric to say this is absolute, but there is a certain period of time within the discipline of the lifestyle that you're choosing, because I'm on a lifestyle journey. I don't diet. I just eat the way I eat. Right. But there's a certain period of time in the journey that your body adjusts to this, and this is essentially how you process. You're a machine. This is how you're fueling yourself. And should you allow yourself to have a cheat meal, then you better be careful, because if you go back to the way that you used to eat, it's going to make you feel like wet crap. I most recently, just in a pinch, I felt nostalgic. I said, man, I want to get fried chicken. I don't eat fried chicken. So with the sense of, I just kind of want to remember what it tasted like. At 2 pieces, it was the worst night I ever had. Like in most recent history, there's 2 pieces of chicken. So, it's essentially, you're right. There is something to it. It's more than something. When you correct your body to eat cleaner, and whatever that may be, pescatarian, vegetarian, vegan, paleo, when you're eating cleaner, when you grab something that's a lot more saturated in the areas that it shouldn't be, your body will have a problem. It'll have a problem processing it. Right?
And I learned that when I went vegan, I started realizing that, because as I've been on the journey, I started getting more into things like detoxing and fasting. And 2 years ago, I decided to try and do like a 2.5 week detox for the first time, really trying to be more alkaline and doing herbs and no cooked foods, certain things. After that 2 or 3 weeks, I was like, I'm going to order I ordered these vegan, I was in New York at the time, and New York has so many great vegan restaurants. So I ordered all this stuff and I ate it and I felt sick. I said, okay, obviously this is not good for my body. And this is not something I should be eating.
Sure.
Of course, sometimes you indulge, but I just knew there were certain things like, okay, I won't indulge in again. And even just a month ago, in my pregnancy, I ordered a vegan pizza from a restaurant that had a vegan menu as well as a non-vegan menu. And usually as a rule of thumb, I don't do that because there's room for errors unless I'm in person, like ordering it. But I was at a hotel for a couple of days. We had an issue with the house and a plumbing issue. So we were ordering stuff from Uber Eats, and the pizza came and it was really cold. And so I took a couple bites and I was like, I don't want this. It's cold. I'm going to order something else, get a refund. But I still took a few bites because so many hours had lapsed since I had last eaten, and I'm pregnant. So I have to be careful of that.
Sure.
And took a few bites and I was done. An hour later, I felt nauseous, and I just thought it was, I'm in third trimester, I'm pregnant, it happens, whatever. And I threw up. I was like, okay, cool, whatever. Is this what happens? An hour later, I'm throwing up again profusely. And now I'm like, no, something is wrong. Like, this doesn't make sense. Like, I'm throwing up. I can't hold anything down. I have like chills, stomach cramps. And finally, I look and I realize, look at the pizza, because we hadn't thrown it out yet because we were in a hotel. I'm like, hey, this is real cheese.
Oh.
They gave me a real cheese pizza instead of a vegan pizza. But the crazy thing about it was, if it wasn't cold, I probably would have eaten like 2 or 3 slices. Sure. But I didn't even eat a full slice. But the fact that a few bites of cheese made me sick, and I haven't had cheese in like 4 or 5 years now. The way my body responded to it so aggressively and so negatively, it had gotten so accustomed to not having it that when I had just 2 bites, my body didn't know what to do. Yeah. And it's just confirmation of like, I have no desire to go back, but it's confirmation, like, I will not go back to that. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like you said, like, your palate changes, your body readjusts, your body reprograms itself. So when you do try to eat these foods, it's like it wreaks havoc on the body. Yeah. And I was like out like for like a week. I was out of commission. Like, I was vomiting, diarrhea, and that's really dangerous for my pregnancy. Sure. And I felt so awful that it happened while pregnant at that. Yeah. But that just goes to show, it's like you're saying, like, you go all this time, all these years, you change your lifestyle, and then you go and have it a little bit, and then your body's like, no, can't do it.
Sure. So before we move into the next segment, I think it's probably important that I probably outline a couple of things. One, you're 5 years into the lifestyle?
I've been doing it since 2014. Oh. So I would say I'm probably about six, like, really committed, like where I've really been on it, like about strict, 6 years. Right.
Strict 6. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. So disclaimer, the opinions and thoughts of Bianca as well as myself are our own. We are not suggesting in itself that this is a lifestyle that you should incorporate. However, it is important that you at least listen to people who have been trained or immersed into the lifestyle. Please consult a fitness professional and or your physician should you have any questions about the diet, restrictions, your own restrictions and or pre-existing conditions. Got to get that out of the way because I don't need someone to give me any.
Definitely, yes.
All right, so there you go, people. The little PC police. There you go.
Right.
So let's talk about this in itself. What struck me is so interesting when we were doing our pre-production is that you were talking about the Black community and how this is something for the Black community to consider. And then also how not necessarily from a socialist, but from a social environment, how this is screaming a problem amongst our society because we have such a restrictive amount of resources.
Right.
You called it a urban desert.
Right, like urban desert, food desert.
Food desert, that's what it was. Food desert.
Food desert. Yeah, so I think that, I'm definitely noticing that now in the Black community, more and more people are kind of getting hip to the veganism, or at least just trying to just be healthy, just make better food choices. Now, when I first started out, it wasn't really popular. I was doing it by myself. I had like no vegan friends. People thought I was crazy. And it kind of isolated me a little bit. And then when I speak to, people in the Black community, like the commentary is like, oh, it's bougie, or, oh, it's uppity, or, oh, it's it's a taboo for us, you know, and a lot of those comments come out of ignorance. We're very ignorant. We don't know better. So that's kind of, you know, we've been conditioned to think a certain way about food, and just life in general. So when you see someone in the community kind of doing something that's against the norm, quote unquote, for what we do, you get kind of the slick commentary. My family, every holiday gathering without fail, like, oh, are you still doing that vegan shit? You know?
Yeah.
Well, we have rice. Can you eat that? You know, it's always a slick, especially being Caribbean, there's always a slick comment. So I kind of just learned to build a tough skin about it. But again, it kind of goes to show the lack of education and like we're talking about, the lack of resources and lack of access. We're not properly educated on how to take care of our bodies, how to consume certain foods, you know, and then we're put in these positions where, you know, again, we're in these food deserts. You know, if you're living in the hood, if you're living in an impoverished neighborhood, you know, there's not a lot of farmers markets and health food stores, you know, and things like that. There are some of those things popping up now in certain areas as we're getting a little more educated and we're getting more and more people to kind of hop on board. But off rip, it's not accessible to us. And if we, you know, we have to drive miles and miles to find a health food store. The food is overpriced and it's hard to get access to. But yet you could easily find a bodega or a corner store with junk food, snack junk foods. You can find a liquor store, you know, but you can't find fresh, right? But you can't find fresh produce. Or if you are in a store there's fresh produce, it costs more than it does to get the frozen dinner. You know, that's not by accident. You have to ask yourself, why is the healthier foods more expensive than, you know, the frozen foods, the TV dinners, the junk foods, the snack foods, box cereals, all these things? And why is there no desire to educate us about this? You know, and then the food that we do consume, if you vegan or not, look at the back of the box and read the ingredients. You can't pronounce half of what's on that list.
Sure.
You don't even know what it is.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? They're putting all these chemicals in our foods. They're not disclosing what it really is. You know, there's like how many different names for sugar, right?
Yeah.
Sucrose, fructose, you know, all these other names. And you might not think there's any sugar in it because it's in a whole nother name. Yeah. You know, certain snack foods that have vanilla flavored, you know, or vanilla flavoring, that's a secretion from, what animal? From the beaver's like butthole or something like that. Like, you know, I just learned that like a couple months ago. And it's like,
is that, wait, I have to fact check this. Wait, hold on.
Yeah, don't quote me on, but I was reading it and it said like a certain type, like if you see vanilla flavoring in certain things, it's not like actual vanilla extract most of the time. It's like the secretion from an animal, or like even in candies, like the wax and the coloring comes from like some secretion off of bugs and stuff like that. But you don't know that because you're just reading these things that have all these other names that you don't, you know, you're not familiar with, and then you're just eating it.
I gotta stop you. Hold on. A vanilla extract is, where does vanilla flavoring come from? It says a chemical compound used in vanilla flavoring and scents come from the anal glands of beavers.
There you go.
I'm going to stop right there because I don't want to read the rest of this. This just hurt my soul. Okay. That just made me cry. All right. No, you're absolutely right. Right. How many, they break down a lot of compounds, they being the royal they, mass produced, big companies, you know, general produced marketplaces will break down all of these products, you know, from a core level and turn them into micronutrients and macro ingredients, so that it can be stretched. It's a stretching product, and they're using that compound wise in order to flavor or preserve whatever food that is being put on the shelf.
Right.
So as what I would do as a nutrition consultant, generally I would tell the clients that they need to shop on the outskirts of the grocery store, because everything inside the aisles is normally the ones that have all of these macros that are very, very hard to track, right? And a lot of sodium at that. So when you start dealing with the plants and the fruits and the vegetables, okay, great. And should you slide over to the meat section, well, that's still on the outskirts of the grocery store. So, I mean, okay, you're still healthier doing it from the butcher shop than you are doing it from the frozen food section, even. And they're adding coloring into your fish. So it's not even that pink. Hate to break it to you. I mean, the sign's right there. I'm not telling you anything to propagate, some civic uprising. It literally says that at the grocery store. It says color added to the fish. And you'd have to wonder why that is. It's more marketable for it to be a brighter pink than it is a soft white. But the fish isn't soft white when you catch it. It's very strange.
Right. Exactly. And a lot of the meats, they're produced in these slaughterhouses where things are not sanitary.
Sure.
The machines are not being properly cleaned. Even I was watching a documentary and they were talking about, the production of milk. They artificially impregnate cows at these like ridiculous rates to keep them producing milk. And the milk it's not a farmer sitting down on the stool milking the cow at the udders. These are machines that are constantly milking the udders, which is causing irritation to their udders and blistering, which means in some cases you have pus that comes from a blister going into your milk. Sure. And my friends get mad at me, like, because I'll make a joke. It's not even a joke, it's serious. Like, they're like, I'm gonna get some cheese. I'm like, oh, you want some cow pus? It's like, oh, why do you have to say that? But that's literally what it is. You know what I'm saying?
This reminds me of a relationship that I used to be in where we would always talk. She was very, very strict vegan. She was vegan for the animals. That's the way she would say it. As opposed to, like, which, look, I understand it. I mean, however you decide to get to the point of what you believe in, I'm not here to uproot your tree. I'm only here to understand, right?
Right.
And if that doesn't match or work for me, then fine. I mean, it's absolutely okay. But I'm not trying to tell you that you're wrong. However, her conversations were the same as yours, which is, do you want pus? Or, she said, well, do you know what the eggs really are? I mean, that's a chicken going through a cycle.
Period.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, no, you never remind me. It's fine. Like, so, and it's okay because I'm going to eat it, but it's still like, I got an iron stomach and, but nonetheless, those things are important, I guess, for those who aren't afraid to see how the sausage is made, so to speak, metaphorically speaking. I didn't mean it literally, but nonetheless, no, I get your entire point.
But it was that thought process that actually kind of helped me, because like I said earlier, I used to love cheese, and I was like, why can't I stop? Like, what is the issue? And then when I realized that's what it was, I was like, wait, why do I shouldn't want that.
Sure.
You know what I mean? I shouldn't want this. But I say all that to say, all these things that, are not healthy for your body, or they're not letting you know. They're not being forthcoming about how these foods are being made so you can make an informed decision. Yeah. And again, regardless of if you're plant-based or you pescatarian, whatever your choices are, just understanding how these ingredients work in your body and the chemicals that are being consumed and that are being unnecessarily added to the foods just to preserve it or for coloring, it makes us sick. Yeah. And the goal, of white supremacy is to continue to oppress. And that's one way to oppress us. You're making us sick. You're keeping us ill. If we're sick, if we're ill, if we're constantly filled with disease, we're not going to be able to rise to our fullest potential.
True.
All of these things affect our mental health as well. Our spiritual health. You're consuming chemicals. It's drugs, really. It's like a drug. It's another addiction.
Yeah.
Sugar is addictive. Exactly. Yeah. It's a dopamine effect. Mm-hmm. So if you have this community constantly dependent on these, and there's a variety of ways they do that, right? But we're talking about the food aspect of it. We're dependent on these chemicals, and we're not thinking clearly. We're not able to, or we're dying at high rates. We're dying at young ages because of heart disease and obesity and all these things. It's almost kind of like a population control situation. Mm-hmm. This is by design. They've been doing this for centuries, finding ways to oppress us, finding ways to keep us from getting access to everything that can actually help us do better.
Yeah.
So this is just one way that they continue to, they poison us, even like in the water, putting fluoride in the water and all these products and things like that. All these things affect your body.
Okay. So then the two things that I need some time on with you is alkaline lifestyle, right? And then also your business, right? So healing and ascension, right? But let's talk about the alkaline lifestyle. Educate me on this. What is that?
So basically with the alkaline lifestyle, that's the lifestyle that, Dr. Sebi had promoted. And I had learned about this. I want to say I really didn't know about it until he passed away. So I started doing some research and looking into things and trying to understand, what he meant by it, what alkalinity meant and things like that. And so, through my research and watching videos of his, basically, of course, plant-based foods, things produced by Mother Nature, and things that alkalize the body. So having to do with the body's pH, eating things that will alkalize versus things that are acidic, okay. And things that will kind of like electrify the body. So one of the fundamental things is not consuming fruits that don't have seeds. So I know a lot of times in the grocery stores, we'll see seedless grapes, seedless watermelon. Yesterday we saw cotton candy flavored grapes. That threw me off. I don't know why
that's not supposed to happen.
I'm like, wait, what? And eating things that are not hybrid foods. So a lot of the vegetables that we consume are hybridized, meaning they're kind of mated, if you want to say, like in a lab.
Sure.
So for example, carrots, according to Dr. Sebi, he'd always say the carrot doesn't naturally grow that way. Mother Nature does not naturally produce a carrot. The carrot is a crossbreed between a wild yam and a Queen Anne's lace. Okay. And it's just, you could go on and on, but really the basis of it is, there's a nutrition guide of what the recommended foods that you should consume majority of the time. But really what it boils down to is just kind of eating as close to Mother Nature as possible. So if Mother Nature doesn't produce it like that, staying away from it as much as possible. And also along with consuming other herbs. And so I had learned about it years back when he passed away, but I wasn't really doing it. I wasn't really diving into it. But about 2.5 years ago, I said, let me really try to like incorporate this more into my lifestyle. And so I decided to do kind of like a cleanse for like 2.5-3 weeks, eating just the foods off the nutrition guide. I didn't do any cooked foods, and I did a lot of the herbs off of the nutrition guide as well. And that just completely like elevated my plant-based lifestyle and kind of opened my eyes even more to the mental and spiritual aspect of eating. And that's when I really started to understand food as it pertains to like eating nutrients and the quality of food versus quantity. Okay. So from doing that, I started getting into more things like fasting and realizing I didn't have to eat as much as I thought I did. Or that even if you're eating more, it doesn't necessarily mean you're fueling your body the proper way. And just seeing how much lighter I felt, how much more clear mentally I felt. Sure. And then through that, I started like my daily routine. Not right now because I'm pregnant. I was still trying to do it, but my doctors and my midwife were like, you have to stop doing that. But I got really into like intermittent fasting. So every day before noon, I wouldn't consume anything but water and tea. Or if I did eat something, it was fruits. So I'll go till 1 o'clock and not really eat anything and be fine. And then have my first big meal around 1 or 2 o'clock and really only eat 2 big meals and be more than satisfied. Sure. Maybe depending if I worked out or something that, a little bit longer that day, I might eat more. But for the most part, I was realizing I didn't have to eat as much as I thought. And when I was doing that, I saw like how much better I felt. My body was functioning differently. My taste buds changed. It just kind of really took my lifestyle to another level.
Gotcha.
And I would, I still indulge in certain things from time to time, but I have my non-negotiables that I don't consume. So I stay away from soy, things like that. Being pregnant, I've been a little bit lazy, with cravings and then morning sickness and things like that. But, for the most part, it's something that I make a regular part of my diet. And consuming things like sea moss. Dr. Sebi spoke a lot about sea moss, and sea moss, it gives you 92 out of like the 100 something minerals the body needs. And like some days I would wake up and just make a smoothie with a bunch of sea moss in it and be good to go for like some hours.
Sure.
Before I eat again.
The information that you're receiving about his lifestyle, is that through his publication? Like he made a lot of publications, but like, are you getting this from his book, or are you catching this through other areas?
So I'm catching this through like reading online and watching a lot of his videos.
Okay.
I think now for some reason I'm noticing a lot of his videos have been taken down off of YouTube. But when I started to get really into it, I was watching a lot of his YouTube videos. I learned about how, he was on trial for claiming to, cure AIDS, and they were trying to have him, prosecuted for quote unquote malpractice.
Mm-hmm.
But he never claimed to be a doctor. He just said, we have these resources to help cure AIDS patients. He went to trial for it, and he actually proved that he did it. He had patients bring in like their medical records, their lab results, all these things. And really the basis of what he was saying is just like, you can cure your disease through food. A lot of our illnesses and ailments come from what we're consuming. Yeah. And you can cure your body simply by cutting out certain foods and fasting.
Sure.
And, I think him, like a lot of holistic doctors, Western medicine isn't going to tell you these things, right? They're not going to tell you, okay, you're really sick, or you're diabetic, so you need to change your diet completely. Or they're not going to tell you, if you fast, or if you do this, or take this herb, right? Because there's no money in the cure, the money's in the treatment. So, and I think that's another aspect of kind of like the white supremacist aspect of it, and not wanting us to know these things. Because imagine if we really knew, like, hey, if I get sick, all I have to do, to get better, if not, or cure it, or at least reduce the ailment, is change what I'm eating, fast for a couple of weeks, or drink this herb, or consume this fruit,
Sure. So I want to throw this in to this discussion, because just for the sake of, granted, you've done your independent research into which you've incorporated this into your lifestyle. That research is fine. The information that you found at the time isn't even a resource now, because they've pulled down the videos, right? So I would recommend that, should you be interested, to the listening public, should you be interested in this, not necessarily challenging the viewpoints of myself or even my guest, you could actually do your own independent research as well to make an informed decision. But also, you could pick up Dr. Sebi's books through a multitude of outlets, including Amazon. If you literally search Dr. Sebi, one of them is the Alkaline diet. That's a book that you can look into. So by cross-referencing that dietary recommendation, because he was a holistic doctor, and I personally give him all credit for that. You could do that independent research by looking at his publication and finding out, should that be an incorporation you want to make. It's the same as what you can make with a paleo diet. It's the same as the Atkins diet. They are based on individuals who felt as though these were the routes to take in order for a healthier lifestyle. You be the judge, you do your own research, and make sure that in itself is good for you. But I do want to ask you this, because granted, you're pregnant, right? And congratulations again.
Yes, thank you.
But you're pregnant, and so you were speaking with your physician, your doctor, and they were advising you, okay, you can still do this, but these are the things you have to do for the benefit of the child, right? For the baby. Even that in itself is still, I find, very good, because not only are you living the lifestyle, you are consulting with the physician. So it's not as though they're against it. It's not like you pull this from out of the woods. You know what I mean? So I give all credit to you for number one, being informed, embracing that lifestyle. You got pregnant afterwards, congratulations. But then still considering that as an aspect that you still want to continue, and consulting with your physician about it. So all of this is, to me, fantastic. I agree with you on this, it being in the lifestyle. So we actually covered a subject that I wanted to talk about, which is plant-based while pregnant, but you already tapped on that. I was telling a few friends of mine that I was going to have this conversation with you, and I got a few questions for you. So,
oh wow, okay.
I got fan questions. We have to talk about protein options being vegan. Yeah.
That's always the topic, pregnant or not. It's like, so how do you get your protein?
Yeah.
So, I mean, aside from pregnancy, like I said, the protein question always pops up, and there's other sources of protein besides meat. There's lots of vegetables that have proteins. Chickpeas have proteins, different beans, legumes, stuff like that. I think the main issue that the people have with it, or the misunderstanding, is that, meat will give you a larger quantity of protein.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I know you're more of like a nutrition specialist, but from what I know,
that, and I'm a Tyrannosaurus Rex. So go ahead.
But meat gives you, a larger quantity of protein, but plants give you a better source of protein. And so the thing with being vegan and plant-based is like, sometimes you have to eat a little bit more of certain things to compensate. Especially because if you really are eating like a whole grain, like plant-based diet, like you're really not eating the processed stuff, they're lower in calories. So sometimes you might need to eat a larger quantity or supplement in certain ways.
Sure.
Tying that to my pregnancy. And so a lot of what I speak about is just off of like research and my own personal experience with how it works with my body. Yeah. So it works for me, may not work for everyone else, necessarily. It's kind of like, again, it's a lot of trial and error. But with being pregnant and being vegan, this is my first pregnancy in general. So it has been a learning curve for me as well now, even though I, know a lot and been doing it for a while. With pregnancy, it's different because, of course, you have another human being who is taking
from you
everything you can. So now there has to be a little bit more supplementation and more awareness of what you're eating. So something I was doing in the beginning of my pregnancy, I had a lot of morning sickness in my first trimester, and I didn't really have an appetite. But in general, I mentioned earlier, it's a habit for me to not eat until about 12 o'clock and go like that. And I was doing that for a large part of my pregnancy. It came back to bite me when I got more towards the end of my second trimester, because there were certain nutrients and things that I needed that I wasn't getting based on that. My baby was fine, but me personally, because he was taking what I was putting in, I needed to put more. And so like 2 months ago, they had discovered my iron was a little bit low, which my midwife told me she sees a lot in her vegan, pregnancy, or her vegan moms. So with that, I had to learn to be a little more cognizant of what I'm eating and the frequency with which I'm eating. So, doing a lot more CMOS. CMOS is a really good source of iron. Just eating more smaller meals throughout the day, which I'm not used to and I don't like doing. I like to do my two main meals, but I've had to now, especially my third trimester, just because there's no space, indigestion, all these different things. I started taking like chlorophyll pills and things like that. So with the pregnancy, I've had to really just be more mindful and put a little bit more effort than I've been accustomed to into what I'm eating, and making sure I'm eating certain things, incorporating dark leafy greens whenever I can throughout the day. Really being mindful of like more iron rich foods. Like I'll be eating a lot more dates. Dates are iron rich. Of course, like dark leafy greens, like I said, the chlorophyll, eating foods that are high in magnesium, so like bananas, things like that. Because if you're not careful, it can really deplete you. And I had like a month and a half where I was depleted, especially when I had my food poisoning situation that I mentioned earlier. Then I got extra depleted. So you really have to be on top of your nutrients, like constantly. I have been taking herbs that are high in iron as well, things like sarsaparilla, burdock root. Again, I'm not recommending it to anyone and telling them what to do. Like, talk to your physicians or your midwife or anything like that during your pregnancy. But I've had to really kind of be more on top of it, because since you are vegan and you are eating more, again, foods that are lower in calories, and you have another body depending on you for the nutrients, you have to kind of double up a little bit more, and be a little bit more careful, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. I think barring pregnancy, right? We were just talking about the journey that a person's going to be on. When we're consulting about this in terms of nutrition, what I'm looking for is to make sure that the individual understands how much protein they're going to consume. That was like question number one. So I'll just stick with protein for that, just being the convo, right? But
right. So I kind of went on like another.
No, that's fine. No, that's absolutely great information, because it probably answered the other question. But nonetheless, in consuming the protein, plant-based or omnivoric, the question is how much of it that I usually get. The question that I usually get is, how much of this am I supposed to eat?
Right.
And so, if you're going to be on a weight loss journey, then clearly the question is going to be, what, in general, just a handheld metric is whatever you weigh, slice that in half, and then that's the amount of protein that you want to eat in order to maintain, lessen it in order to shrink, or lower your weight, increase it in order to gain weight. That's just normally the basis of how you start. It doesn't matter where you get the protein from by that conversation, but it does become different when you start talking about plant-based versus meat, because as you said, you can get more protein from meat per serving, right? You can get 30 grams of protein in a steak, just a steak by argument's sake, 30 grams of protein, maybe 60, depending on how big the steak is, versus how many grams of protein would you be able to gain from, or how many servings of lentils or black beans, or even soy, I guess, or arguably, if they're going to go that route, how much of that would you have to consume in order to get the 30 to 60 grams? Which, for the sake of fitness professionals in a weight gaining, even in respect to your father being in bodybuilding, that'd be a little hard to do. It would be a little hard to do consuming that much, vegetable or vegetative protein, soy protein, pea protein. Most healthiest people that I know in the fitness community that are vegan or plant-based run. I mean, they're distance runners, cross-country runners, marathon runners. I always thought, it was a little something funny to think that maybe the bodybuilders or the larger, more muscular people, that's just not their lifestyle, because it's just way too much food for them to sustain, and you're getting way too much fiber. So you're going to deplete yourself in one area while you're trying to consume in another. But a runner can take the carbs because they're just going to run it off.
They're going to burn it off, right?
They're going to burn it off swimmers. They're going to burn it off in a totally different way.
Right.
So,
I mean, for me, like I'm not someone who really like counts the grams of protein I consume. Sure. I'm not an athlete. I mean, I work out and exercise. Right. I mean, I don't, I exercise and work out, but I'm not like athletic. Sure. So I kind of just, this is what I do. I experiment a lot with my body, and I just kind of go off of how I'm feeling. If something feels off, I'll reassess what I'm eating, do some research. If I'm feeling good, I just keep doing what I'm doing. But I will say, though, there's this documentary on Netflix called The Game Changers. Yeah, I believe it's called. Yeah. And they have
very one-sided, by the way. I'm gonna be real with you. It was very one-sided.
I mean, there are definitely things that I didn't wholeheartedly agree with in terms of food consumption, but I do like the fact that it can kind of show you, like, you can be plant-based and still be athletic. I mean, they did have a lot, like you said, like long distance runners, like more athletes like that. But there was one guy in there who was like really, really buff. He was a weightlifter.
Yeah.
And he was like, I mean, I'm not saying that's like something you're striving for, but I'm like, he kept the weight and he's plant-based. So it's like
So
you
if
said,
he could do
it's
it, yeah.
right. It's doable. It's difficult, but it's doable. But I also think, and this is just my personal opinion, I think people need to work more within what their body's naturally inclined to do. Like I personally had to get to a point where how I want my body to look versus what my body is meant to look like might be two different things. And I had to just kind of accept that and just think more in terms of wanting to be healthy versus trying to look like something that maybe my body isn't designed to do.
Okay,
So,
you're jumping on a whole. I love this, but this is going to take us for a whole new hour. Like this, I amen to that. It absolutely is true though. Like the perception versus reality. I want a body like person A, but you can only get a body like yourself. There's nothing else to say about that. Right. So I can make you, take you into a better place for you, but you won't look like Kim Kardashian because you got to pay for that. So
right, ain't nobody trying to look like her anyway.
Yeah. and I'm not a surgeon. I'm just a fitness professional. So okay. So thank you for educating me on the alkaline. It actually it takes us into Dr. Sebi, which I think is awesome. There's publications where people can read. We got the fan question. That's one. Second fan question though is, how do you handle eating out at restaurants where they don't have vegan options?
So I try not to do it, period, but there's an art to creating meals off of sides at restaurants. And I'd like to think I've mastered that art to a certain degree.
An art.
There is an art. You have to know what questions to ask the waiter. You have to know what to tell them to do. So, for example, let's say I go to a restaurant and among some of the sides are like fries or a baked potato, some spinach, a salad, things like that. There are fundamental questions I always ask, especially when it comes to like potatoes and veggies, because I know restaurants love to cook them in butter or like garlicky butter sauces and all these things. I ask them how it's prepared. I ask them if they can prepare it a certain way. I let them know that I'm vegan, that I'm plant-based. What I started doing now is saying that I have allergies, even though I don't. Because if you tell me you have an allergy,
then they have to really watch out. That's a lawsuit.
Right. And I learned that from my father, because my father, when we go to restaurants, if he'd be dieting for competitions and didn't want salt, he would say, I have high blood pressure.
All right, Dad. Okay.
So, knowing what questions to ask, because again, like for example, like something like fries, you might think, oh, it's fries. Like it's simple, but it's not. I've recently learned that people cook, like for example, Checkers fries. I used to love Checkers fries, and I couldn't understand. Like it's, oh my gosh, it's the best. And I learned like a year ago, it's so good, and the texture is what it is because they cook it in like some type of meat grease and like some type of meat fat, right? Okay. So that's not vegan, right? Obviously. Sure. Also, depending on how strict you are, if you're worried about cross-contamination. So like maybe the fries aren't cooked in any type of meat grease, but they share the same grease that maybe they fry meat in or chicken or something like that. So how I maneuver is if I know ahead of time I'm going with some friends somewhere, I'll look at the menu. I'll try and decide, okay, can I make this work? I might even call the restaurant and say, hey, do you have vegan options? Or do you have a way you can create a vegan dish for me? Okay. And if in any case they can't, I'll either A, eat ahead of time, or B, I'll wait till afterward and go eat, or C, this is just me. I don't care if some people are embarrassed by it. I'll bring my own food.
Oh no, not to bring your own food.
I don't care. I'll bring my own little snacks, maybe order a cocktail or something, because
I'm just gonna say that you do that because you're pregnant. Or you did this before you were pregnant?
I did before.
Oh my God. All right. Okay.
Depends on what you're comfortable with.
I'm uncomfortable now. So, okay. That actually is really awesome. Like you said, there's an art to it, right? So, pre-screening a menu, right?
Mm-hmm.
Making sure that this is going to make some sense. And I guess it's kind of a way of meal prepping, to be honest with you. Like you already know what you're going to do when you get there because you're looking at the menu to see if you like what they're going to have in the first place. That's not bad. That's not bad. Okay, so third question. It's probably going to be a dead on yes, but does alcohol consumption affect veganism?
So yes and no. So some alcohols are vegan and some aren't actually. So wine, for example, I learned this like 2 or 3 years ago. You would think wine would be vegan, but not necessarily so. And it has to do with how it's processed. Okay. And a lot of wine will process using like gallbladder fish protein, and other animal byproducts. But you can purchase vegan wines. If you go to the certain grocery stores and ask like, "Where's your vegan wines?" They'll have a section and it'll show on the bottle if it's vegan. And you want to look for things that say vegan friendly, no added sulfites. And then there are some regular wines and like champagnes that there's this website called barnivore.com, I believe, where you can look up to see if certain alcohols like wines and beers are vegan friendly. Okay. So, I try not to consume too much. Well, obviously now I'm not because I'm pregnant. But in general, I try not to consume too much alcohol. But what I'll stick to when I go out is like I'll just do maybe like tequila that comes from agave. Okay. And like a lime. Sure. Like on the rocks and drink that. Gotcha. If I really feel like I want something to drink, or if I'm, going to be at home or entertaining, or I want, a little something for myself, I'll go to the grocery store and get myself a bottle of vegan wine. When it comes to beers, I'm not a big beer person in general, but beers also, a lot of them are produced and processed using some animal byproducts. So that's something you should look up ahead of time. I'm just not really a big beer person. Sure. But things like, if you stick to things like tequila, like pure tequila, like vodka, vodka is made from potatoes, rum it's fattening, but it comes from sugar. Sticking to like kind of those more hardcore liquors, you're in a clear. Where it does get tricky is if you're getting like mixed drinks. Yeah. So if you're doing like pina coladas, like things with like Baileys and things, those cream, then you gotta like really be like on top of it, because those things will have like the milk and stuff like coquito, like stuff like that. Obviously, is like very dairy, milky based. But
coquito, Kahlúas, Baileys, like you mentioned, asking cream, sure. Right. Good, cool. Okay, fan question segment over. So you touched on a couple of different things that I would like to continue the conversation later. We could just make a different segment about it, or plan for that later on. We could pause this for now, right? You gave me a lot of information to think about though, but I really like your viewpoints because I've been exposed to it as a lifestyle. Whether or not I incorporate or embrace it right now is, it's purely personal preference. But I do understand your basis for why you started. And I do think that it's of benefit to us as a community to actually have these conversations. Like, I don't disagree with you. So this isn't social discord. But I do think that this is a topic that needs to be brought up so that we can understand a perspective, an option, a healthy option at that, right? And then from there, we can let the audience make their own informed decision about whether or not this could work for them or not, or for their family. And you're going to be married. So is your spouse, is he vegan or no?
Absolutely. I am not cooking. I'm not cooking 2 different meals. I'm not going to have a vegan chili and a plant-based chili. I'm not getting 2-3 different sets of pots and pans. No, actually, when I met him, he was curious about the vegan lifestyle. And he was someone who was already like health conscious, like, he was a personal trainer, he's in, fitness and things like that. But he just wasn't, doing the dive. And so he told me he was interested in it and he eventually wanted to do it. So what I did was one day when he was out of town, so when we first started dating, I was at his house, I was staying in his house while he was gone, and I cleaned out his entire kitchen.
Oh. Did you at least tell him beforehand?
No. And I'm not telling anyone else to do it necessarily, but when he came back, he was like, "What happened?" I said, "Well, you said you was about it, so let's go. We're starting from scratch." And he's been doing it ever since. And we even had moments in our relationship where we've broken up and gotten back together, and he still sustained it, even when we weren't together. And so, and now, we're both on the same page. We're going to raise our child vegan.
That's very cool. That's very cool. On the fence about cleaning out the man's fridge. Without him, that's
some
cool.
People just need that push. They just need that nudge.
That nudge is relative. Okay, well,
it's the Caribbean in me. Sorry, we're a little more aggressive.
That's take charge, type of. I got you. Okay, well, that's very cool. Okay, so it's two things I need from you, right? Give me the Healing and Ascension as a business. Let me know what the purpose of Healing and Ascension is, and then also where to find you.
Yeah. So my hope for that, for the Healing and Ascension and my kind of my vision, what I've been trying to do is, it's really just to kind of educate and help guide people who are interested in the plant-based lifestyle, or just simply trying to adapt a healthier lifestyle. What I usually do every month, but I'm taking a break from that to get prepped for my birth next month, is I had put together a group for people who want to join, a very easygoing kind of thing, nothing strict, for people who want to try and adapt a plant-based lifestyle. And I would kind of give them, I provide them with different resources, basically things to read, different kind of monthly goals for themselves to try and slowly eliminate certain foods from their diet, and incorporate more plant-based meals. I'll give the recipe ideas, maybe suggest a grocery list. And the reason I started doing that last year, was because when I was on the journey, I had nobody. No one was around me. No one else wanted to do it. I was completely by myself trying to do it. It was lonely for me. I felt like if I had someone or a group, that I could kind of, like a support group almost, it would have been easier for me. So I made that group to kind of, offer that support and that kind of like community. I feel like, I didn't have a community that I could really kind of reach out to and speak to. Mm-hmm. So, for those who want to be a part of it, it's kind of like a community. You can ask me questions, get ideas, but basically what I want to grow from it is to get more and more people involved, who are really wanting to commit to that. So I can kind of just eliminate the trial and error for them that I went through. Basically just using my personal experience to kind of help them sift through, just the BS of having to try and, experiment all the time, which you still have to experiment to a certain extent. But if I could at least weed out some of this for you, it'd be better, and one of my family members actually gave me the idea to try and do something like this a few years ago, because I would always have people like ask me questions and I'll spend like an hour talking to someone. My cousin is like, you need to monetize on this. Like, do you realize how much legwork you've done? Like, you've done so much of this on your own. You've done so much research on your own. You experiment like on your own body all the time. Like, you should really find a way to, kind of capitalize on it, but still to help. But I want to help my community. That's my goal, is to help my community, the Black community, because I do want people to at least be more informed about this lifestyle. And if they feel like they want to have someone offer them some guidance and some help while they commit, or try and make the shift, that's the service that I would like to provide. So that's kind of what my vision is, just basically offering just some kind of guidance and help, so that people don't have to struggle with it the way that I did when I first started out.
It's important for us to understand that you're not alone. Only pioneers are alone, right? But then after that, it just becomes a community situation. That you're going to do something that people are going to read about later, because you had to walk that alone so that other people didn't have to. So where can we find more about Healing and Ascension?
So my Instagram is Healing and Ascension. So at any point, if you follow me, you can DM me, ask me a question. And of course, as I do things, my goal is in the next few months, I wanted to start doing, like monthly challenges for folks, who, try and get kickstarted into just kind of doing their body resets, detoxes, smoothie challenges, things like that. But anything I'm doing, I do post on my Instagram and I do post on my story.
And I think that to have options and comparable ones at that, and resources where you can gain all the information you possibly can within a community, I think that's very, very healthy. So
yeah, absolutely. It all complements each other, because actually what I do for their monthly goals is a dietary portion, a fitness portion, and a mental spiritual portion. And I have a friend that's a personal trainer, and I will have him sometimes write me workouts for the group, just like basic beginner friendly that anyone can do, because I do look at it it's a holistic thing. I don't think that like I said, the aspect of it for me is like healing your body physically, but which could include trying weight loss, things like that. But you can't compartmentalize it. I think they all complement each other. So it's the dietary, it's the fitness, because for example, you can't outwork a bad diet. So you're working out 6 days a week, but you're eating pizza and burgers every day, and then it all complements each other. You really can't have one without the other. So
mind, body, and soul.
Exactly.
Okay. Healing and ascension. That's healing, common spelling, and ascension on Instagram. All together. No spaces, no underscores. That is where you can find Bianca Mills. But I won't keep you, because I know you're going to be very busy, and in about a month you're going to be really busy. So congratulations to you again. Please extend my congratulations to your spouse.
Thank you. I will.
Be a big moment for you guys.
So, yes.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. So we'll go ahead and sign off. So this has been Hassan with Qualified the Podcast. My guest is Bianca Mills. This episode has been about vegan lifestyle as well as activism in our social environment. We're going to be touching on more of these subjects as the season continues. Please remember to like and subscribe. We are available on all digital streaming platforms as well as on YouTube. You'll be able to catch me on the website at www.qualifiedpodcast.com. Also look for Bianca at Healing and Ascension on Instagram.